Okay. So, welcome to the prophet Isaiah, or the book of the prophet Isaiah. First, as always, the commercials. So, we will be offering the prophet Isaiah today, next Wednesday, and on the 18th. Then in October, I think it's the 9th, 16th, and 23rd, we'll be talking about the minor prophets, Amos, Zechariah, and Jonah. And then in November, we'll be talking about the prophetic role of the laity in the church. Next year, let's look into 2020. Let's get 2020 into sharper view. 2020. All right, never mind. So, if you have to explain it, it's not funny. So I have gotten some requests here and there to do some talks on the world religions. Would that be of interest? Okay. So, we would probably start those, maybe mid-January or so. My question would be, how many of them do you want to hear about? So, we could do as few as 4. So the 4 that we really want to talk about are Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism.
Yes.
But there is at least one other, and maybe 2, that I think might be of interest. The one that you may or may not have heard about is Zoroastrianism, the religion of ancient Persia. I think that one is really important for understanding Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. I would probably do Zoroastrianism before those other religions. The other ones that you tell me whether you want to hear about them are Taoism and Confucianism, 2 of the religions of China. Taoism and Confucianism are kind of a mix of philosophy and religion, but they are part of the religious heritage of China. So we can do 4, 5, or 6. Any? Yeah, Dave.
And will there be any comments about the LDS?
I don't know enough about the LDS. Although, back in March, I went to Nauvoo, Illinois, which was where the LDS people were before they went to Salt Lake City. Nauvoo, what does this have to do with Isaiah? Absolutely nothing. So, Nauvoo in the 1830s was the largest city in the state of Illinois because of the Mormons, because of the Latter-day Saints. But I had not planned, we could do another series sometime about different denominations within Christianity.
Yeah.
But for this particular series, I wasn't planning on doing LDS. But we can at some future point. So,
At the end, I would make our own choice and we'll go from there.
Sure. So, any preferences for
All of them.
all of them?
All
All of them? That's 6. Everybody's okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have to go then because I got to start. All right, very good. Thank you. So you'll notice the handouts. We have the regular handout plus the timeline. The timeline is pretty important for understanding the book of Isaiah because, as I'm about to say, there are actually 3 different Isaiahs. And so the historical context of each of the Isaiahs matters quite a bit. Especially first Isaiah, because first Isaiah deals with things that were going on prior to the Babylonian exile. Okay, so please take that with you, but I would recommend that you bring it back for next week, okay? Because today I hope to be able to talk about first Isaiah, then next week second Isaiah, and I'm not sure. No, it'll be third Isaiah for the third week. Okay. What else? One other thing, I was able to procure a map of the kingdoms of Judah and Israel. Now, what's not on here is Babylon and Babylon and Assyria. The Babylon's here and Assyria's here. Okay, let's that's pretty much where they are, because I'm going to be making reference to them, well, especially to Assyria, not Syria, but Assyria, quite a bit today. This was the second attempt at getting a map. This was my first attempt. So you would have needed a microscope. I thought this would work. Not going to work.
Where did you get that?
I got all this stuff on Amazon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You can get anything you want. Yeah. Oh yeah. One other thing. On Wednesday, September the 25th, at 7 p.m. in the Activity Center, we'll be hearing a presentation called "Aging Gracefully," with a hyphen in it, okay, by Dr. Gary Bierman, whom I'm quite sure has been here before. You'll see, you'll get more information about it in the bulletin, and there will be a poster about it and all that kind of thing. So add that to your calendar. And also, my friend Rory Picker, niece, and I met last week and came up with our topic for our co-presentation on Wednesday, October the 30th. So we will be talking about the 58th chapter of the prophet Isaiah. She will talk... I know you're all familiar with the 58th chapter of Isaiah, but for the one or two who may not be, in that chapter, God and Isaiah are talking about how the fasting of the Israelites is not acceptable to God unless it is accompanied by the work of justice, taking care of the poor, the widows, and the orphans. And Rory told me that her community, her Jewish community, reads that reading on Yom Kippur, their Day of Atonement, in the middle of a 25-hour fast. So in about hour 13 of their fast, they read this reading about how fasting is really of no value to them. So she frequently gets the question, why do we read that? So she will present Isaiah 58 in the context of Yom Kippur. I will present it in the context of the Lenten fast and abstinence and sacrifices. Okay? So, that's October the 30th. But now, Isaiah. So, as I have already said, there are not one, not two, but really three Isaiahs. In other words, there are three authors to this book. There is Isaiah of Jerusalem, and we'll cover him today. That's chapters 1 to 23, 28 to 33, and 36 to 39. Although we'll see that 36 to 39 are actually a pickup of another book of the Bible. It's just picked it up and plumped it down in chapters 36 to 39 of Isaiah. Okay? The period of his prophesying is 742 to 701, more give or take, BCE. Okay? And first Isaiah, keep this in mind, addresses primarily the threat of invasion by the Assyrian Empire. Okay? Second Isaiah covers chapters 34 and 35, and then 40 to 55. It covers the period near the end of the Babylonian exile. And so people, or scholars, assume that this could not be first Isaiah, because the end of the Babylonian Empire was about 150 years after the time when first Isaiah was writing. You never know, but it's doubtful. And then third Isaiah, chapters 24 to 27 and 56 to 66, actually deals with the period after the exile. Now it's conceivable that second and third Isaiah might be the same person, but the styles of the writing are so different and the themes are so different that it seems unlikely. Okay? So most scholars divide Isaiah up into 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. All right? Because the context in which they speak are so different and the literary style is so different. Yeah?
Why isn't it like chapters 1 through 39?
39?
And then 40 through...
55, yeah, that's a great question. And you'll see this throughout the book. First of all, it's not chronological. So you'll have something that occurred in the year 701 in chapter 9, and then something that happened in the year 735 2 chapters later. It hops around, which tells you that the book of Isaiah was redacted or edited, and that it was added onto over time. Okay? It does not flow evenly. Okay? So for whatever reason, there are, there are chapters right within 1st Isaiah that look for all the world like 2nd Isaiah. They're already addressing the Babylonian exile right in the middle of the threat from Assyria. I don't know why it was done like that, but that's the way it is. Okay? All right. As always, there's disagreement over just how much of this was written by a guy named Isaiah. Some say that the prophet Isaiah wrote all of it, which seems unlikely given that the span of the time frame of the book is about 240 years, 260 years. My sister-in-law's mother just passed away the other day at the age of 100. God bless her. She had a great life. I don't know if she could be still writing, 80 years from now, So anyway, there are others who say that there never was an Isaiah, that Isaiah was retrojected into the whole book. But the mainstream opinion seems to be that there was at least 1st Isaiah was Isaiah of Jerusalem, a guy who actually existed. Okay? So who is Isaiah? Who is this guy anyway? So first of all, the name Isaiah means the Lord is salvation, which is really, we'll see today, the primary theme of his message. Trust in God. Trust in the Lord. Okay, he doesn't say much about his personal life, although the quality of his writing suggests that he was of the upper class and that he was educated. Of course, all the authors of the Bible, were educated, and the educated class would have been very, very small. Okay, it was not the common folks who wrote because they couldn't. They never learned how to write. We know that he was, at least in the first book of Isaiah, it says that he was married to a prophetess, if you look at chapter 8, verse 3, and that he had 2 sons with symbolic names, and I'll quiz you on this at the end. Shear Yashub and Maher Shalal Hashbaz. Yes. I'm surprised that no one here has a son or grandson named Maher Shalal Hashbaz. Why is that? So, another thing about Isaiah, that you'll see that there are a lot of passages in Isaiah that are familiar to us. Either because they occur in the Advent or Lenten liturgies, or if you've ever gone to hear Handel's Messiah. There are a lot of works or pieces from Messiah that are taken from the prophet Isaiah. Okay. Also, Isaiah is quoted more often in the New Testament, with the exception of the book of Psalms, than any other book in the New Testament. It is quoted more often in the New Testament than any other book. So there are, it's cited 46 times in the Gospels, 30 times in the letters of Paul, and 30 times in the book of Revelation. Okay? All right, so a very quick update, a review on what an Old Testament prophet is. We were taught that Old Testament prophets, at least most of us were probably taught, that Old Testament prophets were men who predicted the coming of Jesus 700, 600 years prior to his coming. That's really not what they were about. Okay? Although the early church looked back into those prophecies and found, verses within the prophets that they said apply to Jesus. Okay? So, the prophets most often came from a humble background, although Isaiah might be an exception to that. The thing that characterizes all of the Old Testament prophets is that they had a deep understanding of the covenant. The Mount Sinai covenant, and we've covered that before. The promises made by God and the promises made by the chosen people in the covenant. They were deeply aware of the covenant. So in that sense, they were conservative people because they wanted to conserve conserve the contents of the covenant. At the same time, they were men of great insight because they could look around them and see that the chosen people, the people of Israel, the people of Judah, were not living up to the promises that were contained within the covenant. Okay? To keep the law, to worship only God, to not enter into military alliances, and to take care of the poor, the widows, and the orphans. They were failing, and we'll see in Isaiah how he articulates that. So they would, because of their deep insight into the covenant, and because they saw that the people of their own time were not living up to the covenant, they confronted both the leadership and the people of their time and said, hey, you are not doing what you are supposed to do. Okay? You may be engaging in all kinds of religious formalism. You might be doing the sacrifices right. You might be saying the prayers right. But if you're not living up to the covenant, that means nothing to God. So they were fearless in their confrontation of the people and the leadership. And then after warning the folks, they would say, and if you don't get your act together, something bad is going to happen. Okay? There will be punishment. And as it turns out, the people of Judah saw the Babylonian exile as their punishment for not living up to the covenant. Just as the people of Israel, the northern kingdom, saw their punishment as they're being captured by Assyria and taken out of their country as well. Okay? And given the fact that the message that they delivered was something that the folks didn't want to hear, they were universally warmly accepted and embraced by the people to whom they spoke. No, they routinely faced ridicule, rejection. In general, things were pretty well off. The folks were doing pretty well during the time of the prophets. Life was pretty good, although there were, occasional threats from these outside, their enemies. And so when somebody comes to you when things are going well and says, hey, you better change and you better shape up your act, there's usually two reactions. The first one is, oh, right. And the second one is, no, you're wrong. We're not going to do that. Okay? So the prophets were not well received. All right. One other thing that I'll make reference to often is the book of Isaiah contains many oracles, O-R-A-C-L-E-S. Oracles are divine utterances. Think about the oracle at Delphi in the Greek tradition. They would go there to try to hear from the oracle at Delphi about what was going to happen. So these oracles are pretty much messages delivered to the prophet in answer to some kind of request for guidance. Lord, what do you want me to do? All right, well, here's what I want you to say. Here's what I want you to do. All right, those are contained in the oracles. All right, so enough about the general background. Let's now jump into some more specific background about 1st Isaiah. Yep, I said all that. Oh yeah, so chapters, I mentioned chapters 36 to 39. They are, if you look it up, you will see that they're almost exact copies of the 2nd book of Kings, chapter 18, verse 13, to chapter 20, verse 19. So if you look in the 2nd book of Kings, you'll see Ahaz and Hezekiah and Jotham and all these guys that are referenced. All right? The time frame, as I've already said, is 742 to 701 BCE. The dominant power that the people of Judah were up against were the Assyrians. And if you look at your sheet, you will see the names of the kings of Judah during his time. They're at the bottom left: Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. And you'll also see the names of the Assyrian kings in the upper left. Tiglath-Pileser. I looked these up. If you Google, pronounce Tiglath-Pileser, it'll give you a pronunciation. Then there's Shalmaneser. Shalmaneser the fifth, that is. Sargon the second, who's mentioned, his role is the least, and he has the easiest name, wouldn't you know? And then there is Sennacherib. Okay? So, now, this is when it gets a little bit complicated, because First Isaiah deals mostly with 2 events that took place during his own time, both of which had to do with the threat from Assyria. So, here is episode number 1. This first threat begins under King Jotham. This is found in Isaiah chapter 7 and also in the 2nd book of Kings, chapter 15. So, in the year 735, the kings of Aram, that's Syria. Here it is. Aram Damascus, the kings of Syria and Israel. Now, remember that by this time, Israel is divided into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. That happened right after the time of Solomon. It happened in about the year 920. So the kingdom of Israel was not united for very long. Saul brought it together, and then David, and then Solomon, and then it split apart. So this is 200 years after that. So now, Aram, or Syria, and Israel are attacking Judah. This story is also told, if you care to look it up, in the 2nd book of Chronicles, chapter 28, verses 5 to 7. So the stuff of the book of Isaiah, is written in these, quote, historical books. And I put the word historical in quotes on purpose. So then if you go to 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verses 17 and 18, Judah is attacked again. This time, again, by Syria and Israel, but also this time by the Edomites and the Philistines. So the Edomites are down here, and the Philistines are over here. And poor Jerusalem is right here. So they're getting hit from all sides. Okay? By this time, Jotham is no longer the king. Now it's Ahaz. And it's Ahaz and Hezekiah that are the 2 main players here. So if you go to Isaiah 7, and we will, Isaiah and his son, Shear-Yashub, they advise Ahaz, let me back up. Ahaz is considering entering into an alliance with Assyria, so that Assyria will take care of all these other folks. Okay? he wants to enter into a military alliance. Now remember, one of the 4 promises that the chosen people made in the covenant was to not enter into military alliances with other nations. Why? Because to enter into a military alliance with another nation was to enter into an alliance with their gods. And so Isaiah and Sher Yashub come to Ahaz and they say, don't do it. Don't enter into any kind of alliance with Assyria. Trust in your God. Don't trust in their gods. Okay? And Isaiah and Sher Yashub say that God would never allow Jerusalem to be defeated. Okay, well, eventually he would be proven wrong, but this is his message to Ahaz. So, of course, Ahaz does not listen to Isaiah, and he enters into an alliance with Assyria anyway, hoping that they will take care of Judah's enemies. So Tiglath-Pileser, he defeats the Philistines. He pretty much takes care of Israel and Syria, and he annexes these territories into his empire, which is good, but not so good, because now you have Assyria almost completely surrounding Judah. Not so good for them. So Tiglath-Pileser knew what he was doing. Okay, he had Judah and Jerusalem in his crosshairs. So Judah is saved for now, but at the price of its own independence. It becomes kind of a vassal state of Assyria. Okay, it becomes a colony, a protectorate, or whatever of Assyria. Okay. So that's episode number 1. Bottom line, Isaiah tells Ahaz, don't enter into an alliance with Assyria. He does it anyway. Second episode involves Ahaz's successor, Hezekiah. He ascends to the throne in the year 704. At this time, Judah is still, it's not under complete control of Assyria, but it's a vassal state. And if you're a vassal state, what you're doing is you're buying your independence. You're paying a huge bounty in order to maintain your, quote, independence. All right. So in 705, see the kings of Assyria, Sargon II died. See, he doesn't have much to do with this. All we know about him is that he died. So then, after him comes Sennacherib in the year 704. And it is typical in the ancient world that when an emperor or a king dies, that there's some hesitation or chaos within another country. So Judah is thinking, well, maybe this is my opportunity to really get my freedom. Or Hezekiah is thinking that. And at the same time, Egypt approaches Hezekiah to form an alliance. So Egypt, way over this way, wants to enter into an alliance with Hezekiah and Judah to take on the Assyrians. And at the same time, the leader of Babylon, whose name is not on that sheet of paper, Merodach-Baladan, great, he too is interested in an alliance with Assyria. Okay, so they're lining up to try to defeat the Assyrians. At this time, Hezekiah comes down with some kind of illness. Sounds like almost like a soap opera, doesn't it? So Hezekiah comes down with an illness, and Isaiah responds by promising that he will recover from the illness. And that will be Hezekiah's sign that Judah will be protected from being taken over by Assyria. So Hezekiah does recover from his illness, and then, because he listens so intently to Isaiah, he enters into an alliance with Egypt anyway. Okay? as you can imagine, Isaiah opposes this rebellion, okay, and this alliance. So then in the year 701, Sennacherib is ready to go. So he attacks both Judah and Egypt. He defeats Egypt very, very quickly. He attacks Judah. He asks for terms of surrender. He imposes a huge fine on Judah. And then he attacks Judah again. And this time, Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, is placed under siege. So now what are they going to do? Isaiah tells Hezekiah once again, hang tight, trust in God. God will not let Jerusalem fall. Okay? He does finally listen to Isaiah, and amazingly, Jerusalem is spared. Okay? So the Assyrians never did take over Jerusalem. So there are, as we'll see, there are conflicting reasons within the book of Isaiah why Jerusalem did not fall. One of them is that the Assyrians saw some other enemy on the horizon, and so that held them back. And the other one is that God defeated the Assyrians. Okay, so there's both a military, political cause for the sparing of Jerusalem, and also a religious reason for the sparing of Jerusalem. All right, so after this time, Jerusalem is spared. The people are rejoicing because, Jerusalem is spared, but Isaiah tells them, hey, this is, pretty much of a Pyrrhic victory. I mean, yeah, you were spared. However, don't expect this to last. Okay? Yeah.
Aren't I sitting there thinking about all this fighting going on and what goes on worldwide? But what are they fighting for? Why are all these kingdoms trying to take over? Is there oil or what are they killing each other for to get all these?
Yeah, well, they're killing each other for there's farmland.
Farmland.
There are minerals, iron. There's access to the sea. They're fighting over the same things pretty much that people fight over today, resources. Not much has changed when it comes to that.
Because you think most of these are deserts.
Some of it's desert. Down here is more desert, but up here is pretty rich farmland, the way I understand it.
Okay.
North of Jerusalem. Yeah. And to the best of my knowledge, Lee, the chariots were not powered by oil. So that's what my research tells me.
And you need to pay for the horses, I guess.
Exactly.
Mark, you have a question back here.
Yes. Yeah.
Were there any sort of natural disasters like floods or earthquakes to emphasize these religious points?
Oh, well, in Isaiah there are none referenced. There are no references to any floods, but throughout the Bible there are a lot of references to earthquakes and floods and whatever, either real or fictitious, that have meaning, like the flood with Noah, which is fictional. That story is told, to say something about God's relationship with His people.
So you're saying
God's-
we're never going to find Noah's Ark? Is that what you're telling us?
That's if somebody finds an ark, I'll say good for you. But one of my students at SLU just asked that question because last week we were talking about the Old Testament. I said, well, think about it. Did Noah go get the polar bears? And there were like literally millions of species. Did he get every species of gnat and every species of, spider monkey and all of that? Second, how were they fed? Third, how did they dispose of all the waste? There's a million problems with the story of Noah. You know, you can't fit, you know, all those. They just don't fit. It just, you know, there's just a lot, many problems with that story, unless you look at it from the point of view of its religious meaning. Then it is a very important story. But to look for an ark, and a lot of people do, that's fine. It doesn't change anything as far as the meaning of the story goes, in my book. Plus, there are other flood stories in the ancient Middle East at that time. If you've ever heard of the Gilgamesh epic, for one thing.
Well, don't they say that every major religion has a flood?
Yeah, there are flood stories in a lot of the religions. Yeah, there are flood stories. Floods were important. Water had a lot of symbolic value. A lot of symbolic value in the ancient world because it could be so unpredictable. You needed it to live, and yet it could kill you, as the folks in the Bahamas will tell you right now.
Right.
You know, it's an ambiguous thing. It's a blessing and a curse.
Oh, it costs $50.
All of a sudden, I want an ice cream cone. All right, the themes of First Isaiah. What are some of the religious themes in it? First of all, Isaiah sees God as the Lord of the nations, exalted and powerful, who has complete dominion over Jerusalem. You will see this in his first vision in chapter 6. His favorite title for God is the Holy One of Israel. Okay? So, two things that are illustrative of God's exalted status. First of all, first Isaiah talks about God as the creator. It is God who created everything. Second, it is God who is in control of history. And we will see in 2nd Isaiah, I'm tipping my hand a little bit, that 2nd Isaiah actually refers to Cyrus, the king of Persia, who saved the Judahites from Babylon. The term Messiah is applied to him. In other words, God is so much in control of history that he can use pagan kings to accomplish his purposes. Okay? All right, so he's in control of history. First, Isaiah has a very favorable view of the Jerusalem monarchy, the Davidic line of succession. Okay, he believes that the Davidic monarchy was divinely chosen and favored by God. He speaks out often about social justice. And the reason why he did that is because he believed that oppression of the weak members of society is an offense against God. We'll see that soon. For first Isaiah, Judah's primary sin is pride. And it is their pride that will cause them to be punished. However, God's punishment, as is also true in the Noah story and in other places, God's punishment is not final. God's punishment paves the way for restoration. And so Isaiah leaves open the door for hope. Okay? That's why the title of this series is Isaiah, Prophet of Warning and Hope. Right? All right, so now let's look at the actual text of Isaiah. Not all of it, but we're going to look at some illustrative verses here. So let's look at chapter 1. This is chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. So, when God, in verse 2, when God speaks, "Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken." When God speaks, both the heavens and the earth perk up their ears. Okay? He says, sons have I reared and brought up, but they have rebelled against me. So they have not, God has been like a father to Judah, but they have not been faithful sons and daughters. And then he says, this is God speaking, the ox knows its owner and the ass its master's crib, but Israel does not know, my people does not understand. So that's really kind of an insult to the people of Judah, because they're dumber than the ox or the ass. Okay? And the ox and the ass are notoriously stupid and stubborn creatures. Isaiah is saying the people of Judah are worse than that. Ooh. So, then verses 4 through 9. Ah, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, offspring of evildoers, sons who deal corruptly. They have forsaken the Lord, they have despised the Holy One of Israel, they are utterly estranged. Why will you still be smitten, that you continue to rebel? The whole head is sick and the whole heart faint. From the sole of the foot, etc., etc. Verse 7. Your country lies desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. In your very presence, aliens devour your land. It is desolate as overthrown by aliens. So the context here is actually Hezekiah's rebellion against Sennacherib. So we're dealing with the second episode of the two episodes that I mentioned in chapter 1. Okay, so don't look for some kind of straight chronology. It jumps around. Okay, as I said, not sure why. Okay, and then there's a reference here. And the daughter of Zion is left like a booth in a vineyard. And this is a great metaphor, like a lodge in a cucumber field. Now we get it, like a besieged city. So in other words, the daughter of Zion, that is Jerusalem. Jerusalem has so far escaped destruction. Okay? Now, we move on. Uh-oh. Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Well, that's the rulers of Judah. He's comparing them to Sodom and Gomorrah. Not a favorable comparison. Give ear to the teaching of our God, you people of Gomorrah. What to me is the multitude of your sacrifices, says the Lord. I have had enough of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed beasts. I do not delight in the blood of bulls or of lambs or of he-goats. In other words, the sacrifices being offered in the temple. When you come to appear before me, who requires of you this trampling of my courts? Bring no more vain offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath and the calling of assemblies. I cannot endure iniquity and solemn assembly. Do you hear what Isaiah is saying? Okay, so all of this liturgical correctness that all this observation of the proper rituals and whatever, he's saying it means nothing to me. Your new moons and your appointed feasts, my soul hates. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of bearing them. When you spread forth your hands, I will hide my eyes. I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourselves. Make yourselves clean. Remove the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Correct oppression. Defend the fatherless. Plead for the widow.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yes, it is. This is in a few verses kind of the heart of Isaiah's message. Okay? That all of your sacrifices and your new moons and your offerings and your incense and all that stuff is worthless. Worthless in the eyes of God without this. Justice, correcting oppression, defending the fatherless, pleading for the widow. Very strong, isn't it?
Yeah. Who was he reaching? But when he's yelling all this stuff.
He is talking to the leadership and the people of Judah.
primarily concerned with Judah.
Yet the southern kingdom. This, the context of this is, First Isaiah is the southern kingdom. Okay? But you're going to hear Judah and Israel, those terms, used interchangeably. Okay? It gets confusing, but I'll try to unconfuse,
Please.
if there is such a word. Disconfused. I like that, yeah. All right. Verses 21 to 28. Notice here how the faithful city, this is Jerusalem, has become a harlot, a whore. She that was full of justice, righteousness lodged in her, but now murderers. Your silver has become dross, your wine mixed with water, your princes are rebels and companions of thieves, etc., etc., etc. Therefore, the Lord says, the Lord of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, I will vent my wrath on my enemies and avenge myself on my foes. I will turn my hand against you and will smelt away your dross as with lye and remove all your alloy. And I will restore your judges and your counselors as at the beginning. Afterward you shall be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. Restoration. Hope. Okay? So in other words, these few little verses kind of explain are the theology behind Judah's understanding of their punishment from Assyria, by being attacked by Assyria. It was seen as punishment for the sins that they had committed in violation of the covenant. And it was also seen as a purification, like the smelting of silver. Okay? It was seen as a purification of them as a nation. Does that make sense? And then there would be restoration. God would restore them to the greatness that they had known before. Okay. So that hopeful message continues again. And these words here are repeated in the book of the prophet Micah, chapter 4, verses 1 to 3. You'll see them again. I don't know who copied who. The word which Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. It shall come to pass in the latter days. Ask yourself if you've ever heard these words before. It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. That mountain is Mount Zion. The mountain upon which the temple is built, which the ancient Judeans believed was the highest spot on earth. The closest spot on earth to heaven. Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall decide for many peoples. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. A beautiful vision of restoration, a beautiful vision of peace and unity. And notice, he says it's not just Judah itself, it is the nations. The nations will come to Jerusalem. The nations will come to Jerusalem in a spirit of peace.
In fact, they're coming back to Mecca, when they say that they have to go back to Mecca once a year. That's completely different.
That's a different thing.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
They're saying they're all going to come back and change their ways to do this.
Well,
what are they coming back to, Judah?
Yes, they're coming back to Jerusalem. What Isaiah is saying is that God, he is one of those who transformed the idea of God from a national God, from a tribal God to a national God to the God of all. Okay? So Isaiah is one of those who universalizes the idea of God and makes God the Lord of the nations. Not just our God, the God of Israel, but the Lord of all the nations. And eventually he's saying all the nations will understand that Yahweh is the God. Okay? Hasn't happened yet, but, you know. And then quickly, verses 17 and 18. I hope this is helpful. I thought it was important to actually look at the book itself. You know, sometimes I, just start talking about the book rather than looking at the book. All right, so, and the haughtiness of man shall be humbled, and the pride of men shall be brought low, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. And the idols shall utterly pass away. The idols of the other nations will utterly pass away. Okay? Here's the pride of men. Okay? That's Judah's sin, right? Is pride. So, chapter 3. Yeah, I might just skip that one. That's all he's doing there is saying that at the time of Sennacherib's non-invasion of Jerusalem, there were the leadership kind of like ran. They kind of chickened out and didn't stay. And so Isaiah is talking about this leadership vacuum that existed in Judah. So, like they do at the football games, for the sake of time, we'll move now to the third quarter. So, did I miss chapter 4? No. Okay. Chapter 4. My commentaries say that these verses were inserted into Isaiah much later, okay? Because it's such a message of hope. And the main thing I wanted to call your attention to, let me read a little bit of it. In that day the branch of the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land shall be the pride and glory of the survivors of Israel. And he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy, everyone who has been recorded for life in Jerusalem. Notice down here, then the Lord will create over the whole site of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day and smoke and the shining of a flaming fire by night.
Light on the hill.
Just like Moses, okay? The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. For over all the glory there will be a canopy and a pavilion. It will be a shade by day from the heat, and for a refuge and a shelter from the storm and rain. Okay? So there you will see some allusions to the deliverance from Babylon being compared to the deliverance from Egypt.
What about my book says chapter 4, 7 women will take hold of one man on that day, saying, we will eat our own food and wear our own clothing. Only let your name be given us, put an end to our disgrace.
Yeah.
What is that?
I don't know. I'd have to look that one up. If you remind me afterwards, we can look that one up and see. 7 women shall take hold of one man.
It's just put in,
Yeah, it's it seems a little out of context, doesn't it?
In my Bible, I'm not going to quote it. That phrase is there because if you go to war, who gets killed? All the men are gone.
And then,
What is the thing that a Jewish woman has to do?
yeah, it has to be married, right?
Has to be married and has to have a
All right,
child.
to have a child, yeah.
And so this allows you to at least have some kind
Oh.
of husband or protection
Yeah.
from that rage within the people themselves.
Yeah, so
It may not
so
be
the
the
women
number
are saying,
7.
in other
but-
words, the women are saying, we will take care of ourselves.
But
But
we
7
need to-
women will come to one man and say, please give us a child.
Yeah.
What a guy.
But you're surviving as a tribe. You're a tribe.
It's survival.
I'll say,
Leave. So, yeah, remember one of the promises that God made in the covenant was that the women would be fertile. In other words, they would survive. They would continue as a tribe and as a race. So, okay. I think we cleared that one up. All right, so this is called the Song of the Vineyard. This is kind of a parable, if you will. Let me sing for my beloved a love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He digged it. That was not my word. That's the word that was in there. I think it should be dug, but he digged it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower, hewed out a wine vat. He looked for it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, I pray you, between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? So who is the owner of the vineyard?
the Lord.
God is the owner of the vineyard. And who are the grapes? It's the people of Judah. They're sour grapes, right? They're wild grapes. So what is God going to do to his vineyard?
Turn it over.
And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste. It shall not be pruned or hoed, and briars and thorns shall grow up. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant planting. And he looked for justice, but behold, bloodshed. For righteousness, but behold, a cry. Okay? So there's the meaning of the parable. God has taken care of his people, and they have not lived up to their end of the bargain. These next verses, I'm going to go through quickly. They are a series of woes. Whenever you hear about woes, like we're hearing, I think, in the Gospel of Matthew at daily Mass, woes against the Pharisees. You whitewash sepulchres and all of that. Okay, if you are woed, you don't want that. That's not a good thing. Woe to those who join house to house, who add field to field until there is no more room, and you are made to dwell alone in the midst of the land. The Lord of hosts has sworn in my hearing. Surely many houses shall be desolate, large and beautiful houses without inhabitant. So, this is what he's addressing. That at this time, there is this practice, as there was being done by the Romans during the time of Jesus, of buying up or taking over family subsistence farms and creating huge commercial farms out of them. Okay, and that's very likely what the Assyrians were doing. Yeah, commercial farming. Okay, yeah, I mean, very much.
It sounds like a commune to me.
Well, so woe to those who rise early in the morning. Well, that means I'm spared. Woe to those who draw iniquity with cords of falsehood, who draw sin as with cart ropes. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, and so on and so on. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine and valiant men in mixing strong drink. Woe to you! Therefore, as the tongue of fire devours the stubble and as dry grass sinks down in the flame, so their root will be as rottenness, and their blossom go up like dust. For they have rejected the Lord of hosts and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. Okay?
Can I just ask a question? What
Sure.
translation is that?
That is the New International Version. It's the only one I could find that would allow me to do what I did here. Okay,
Yeah.
I put these things that I wanted, in larger print, put them all together. Most of it looks like well, I can't get rid of chapter 6.
It's more in paragraphs than,
It's long, most of it is just little phrases, so you gotta do a lot of backspacing and all that, you know, so that's what I was able to do here. So now let's go to chapter 6. This is the commissioning of Isaiah, okay? And you know from the Bible that the call narrative or the commissioning narrative is a common thing. So if you look at first book of Samuel, chapter 3, verse 1. The book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verses 4 to 10. Moses receives his call in Exodus chapter 3. Okay? So what this does is it gives credence, and justifies the call of the prophet. So, this should be familiar too. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, well this is like 742. I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne high and lifted up. And his train filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face. With 2 he covered his feet. Feet there means, by the way, it means they're private parts. So angels, the seraphim actually had them. And with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy. Here's from our Mass. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. All right? And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me. Okay, he's woeing himself. For I am lost. I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. So in other words, seeing the perfection of the Lord, the God of hosts, he sees his own shortcomings and his own imperfections. Similar to Peter when he sees the Lord after the resurrection and realizes his own imperfection and jumps into the water. Okay? That's a very rough parallel there. Then flew one of the seraphim to me, having in his hand a burning coal, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth. And he said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin is forgiven. In other words, he has been refined. Okay? His tongue has been refined. Like silver or like lead or like gold. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here I am, send me. Okay? Moses, that's a song, right? Yeah. And he said, Go and say to this people, Hear and hear, but do not understand. See and see, but do not perceive. In other words, he's telling him what his message should be. Make the heart of this people fat and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn and be healed. And then I said, How long, O Lord? And he said, Until cities lie waste without inhabitant, and houses without men, and the land is utterly desolate. And the Lord removes men far away in exile, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. Okay? So, that is what Isaiah is commissioned to say. Now, we get to chapter 7, which I think you will also find is familiar.
A lot of doom and gloom here, isn't it?
Yes, there is. Yes. He was speaking at a time when, he believed that the people of Judah were not trusting in God. Lordy.
Loaf of bread and a dozen eggs.
Yeah.
There we are. Okay. In the days of Ahaz, son of Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, Rezin the king of Syria and Pekah the son of Remaliah, the king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to wage war against it, but they could not conquer it. This is the first episode. Okay, remember the first? This is the attack by Aram, which is Syria, and Israel, which you will see is also called Ephraim. See why you need a scorecard? All right. So, They could not. When the house of David was told, Syria is in league with Ephraim, that's Israel, his heart and the heart of the people. I love this. His heart and the heart of the people shook as the trees of the forest shake before the wind. And the Lord said to Isaiah, go forth to meet Ahaz, you and Shear-Yashub, your son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field, and say to him, take heed, be quiet, do not fear, and do not let your heart be faint because of these two smoldering stumps of firebrands at the fierce anger of Rezin and Syria and the son of Remaliah. Because Syria with Ephraim and the son of Remaliah has devised evil against you, saying, let us go up against Judah and terrify it, and set up the son of Tabiel as king in the midst of it. Thus says the Lord God, it shall not stand, and it shall not come to pass. So he's telling Ahaz, don't worry about it. Trust in God. God will take care of you.
So this is the prophet telling the king of the land that don't worry about going to war, I'll take care of you.
Yes. Do not enter into a military alliance. Yes. Against Syria and Israel. Don't do it. Trust in God. That was one of the promises of the covenant. Don't enter into military alliances with foreign nations, because when you do that, you're entering into an alliance not only with them, but with their gods. Don't do that. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and still there, isn't it? The city is still there. And the head of Damascus is Rezin. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be broken to pieces so that it will no longer be a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria. That was the capital of Israel, Samaria. And the head of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. If you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. Okay, now, so there's that. He's telling Ahaz, hang tight, trust in God. Now, I know you'll remember these verses. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask a sign of the Lord your God. Let it be as deep as Sheol, the underworld, the netherworld, or as high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test. Pride. Okay? I'm not going to listen to the Lord because I know better. And he said, hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary men, that you weary my God also? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a young woman shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Aha! He shall eat curds and honey when he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land before whose two kings you are in dread will be deserted. In other words, well, I'll explain that when I'm done. The Lord will bring upon you and upon your people and upon your father's house such days as have not come since the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, the king of Assyria. So, we understand that as a prediction of the coming of Jesus, right? Behold, a young woman shall conceive and bear a son. In this context, in the context in which Isaiah is speaking, he is saying to Ahaz, you are going to have sexual relations with your wife and bear a son. That son would be Hezekiah. And it would be Hezekiah who would be the one whose name would be Emmanuel, or God with us. Hezekiah would be God's representative, God's agent on earth to make his will come about. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, Christianity the Christians looked back at that verse and said, see, Isaiah was talking about the coming of Jesus.
Yeah.
But I have a suspicion that if you were to interview Isaiah back then, he would have said, what? Okay, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Christianity saw it as a prediction of the coming of Jesus. This is what they did. This is what the authors of the New Testament did all the time. They came to look upon the Hebrew Scriptures as their own, as a prefiguring of what would happen when Jesus came. Okay? Let's see. I actually did a paper on that verse, Isaiah 7:14. Notice here, it says a young woman. This is the correct translation. In Hebrew, that word is alma, which can mean a young woman who is either a virgin or not. It does not necessarily mean that. However, when that verse was translated into Greek, the Greek word that was used to translate alma was parthenos, which in Greek does mean virgin. And so then when Jerome translated the Bible into Latin, he just translated it as, virgine, or whatever the word is in Latin. So that's how the young woman became a virgin. Yeah, David?
In chapter 9, it talks in terms, within 60 years and 5, nations are going to be destroyed. That is, the problem will go away. But what happens if they wait the 60 years? That's beyond their lifespan.
Yeah, well, it's a prediction of the near future. Okay, but it's also a prediction of the very near future. If what Isaiah is saying to Ahaz is, I am going to take care of you, and here's the sign. You are going to have a son who will be Hezekiah, and he will be God with us, and he will protect us. And as it turned out, he did. In a way, Jerusalem was spared. And what those 60 and 5 years are referring to is the eventual demise of the Assyrians. They fell into decline, okay? Always keep in mind that, there are things written back into these predictions. It's like, I foresee that the St. Louis Rams will win the Super Bowl in the year 2000, and I write that back into a novel that I'm writing, Makes me look like a genius. Well, I already knew the outcome. So this 65 years is probably written after it had already happened. Does that make sense?
Do we know that a year at that time is the same as a year, or what we call it?
It's close. It was 360 days. It was a lunar year rather than a solar year. Okay? Yeah. And their reckoning of years was like, we saw in the year King Uzziah died. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is that? So historians have tried to piece all this together. And so they're saying the year King Uzziah died is somewhere around the year 740 BC. Based on records in the Old Testament, based on records from ancient Babylon, from ancient Assyria.
Interpretations all the way around.
Yeah, they're trying to piece it all together. Okay. Here we go. Now, chapter 8. Then the Lord said to me, take a large tablet and write upon it in common characters belonging to Maher-shalal-Hashbaz, his other son. And I got reliable witnesses, Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jeberechiah, to attest for me. I practiced these this week. And I went to the prophetess, that's his wife. I went to the prophetess. So his wife seems to have been a prophet as well. And she conceived and bore a son. Then the Lord said to me, call his name Maher-shalal-Hashbaz. For before the child knows how to cry, my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria. So this is a sign that the Assyrians, this is that first episode, that Damascus, which is Syria, and Samaria, which is the capital of Israel, that they will be defeated by the Assyrians. That's the sign of Maher-shalal-Hashbaz. Okay, next. Chapter 9. I know it seems like we have many, many chapters to go, but not as many as you might think. This is a description of of Emmanuel, Hezekiah. But there will be no gloom for her that was in anguish. In the former time he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the latter time he will make the glorious way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light.
Oh, yeah.
Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shined. Thou hast multiplied the nation, thou hast increased its joy. They rejoice before thee as with joy at the harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, thou hast broken as on the day of Midian. Sound familiar? For every boot of the tramping warrior in battle tumult, and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given. That's Hezekiah. And the government will be upon his shoulder. That's a beautiful, listen to that from Handel's Messiah, this particular piece. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end upon the throne of David and over his kingdom to establishment, and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. So I actually learned that these particular titles, which were also titles given to the Roman emperors, were actually titles given to the Egyptian pharaohs. Okay, but this is this is another one of these verses that was reinterpreted by Christianity to say that this Isaiah is referring to Jesus. Make sense? Okay. Let's see. Chapter 11. Chapter 10 is long. Chapter 10 is very long. Chapter 10 never ends. There we go. All right. This here is a description of the ideal Davidic king. Remember I said that Isaiah has great respect for the Davidic monarchy. Okay? What a surprise that the New Testament will also have a great respect for the Davidic monarchy. They want to make sure that Jesus is of the house of David. Right? There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. Who is Jesse? David's daddy. Right? And a branch shall grow out of its roots, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what he sees, but what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. Righteousness shall be the girdle of his waist, and faithfulness the girdle of his loins. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall feed, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. A vision of a time, a perfect time, almost like what? When was the world perfect? Eden. This is a description, or let's say, a hearkening back to the time of the Garden of Eden before sin entered the world. Okay, that's what Isaiah is doing here. Okay. All the way to chapter 17. Ooh. Oh yeah, now we're moving. 15, 16. Couldn't you know it? Chapter 17. An oracle concerning Damascus. Damascus, the capital of Syria. Behold, Damascus will cease to be a city and will become a heap of ruins. Her cities will be deserted forever. They will be for flocks, which will lie down, and none will make them afraid. The fortress will disappear from Ephraim. Ephraim is a reference to Israel, the kingdom of Israel, and the kingdom from Damascus. And the remnant of Syria will be like the glory of the children of Israel, says the Lord of hosts. So,
Syria is practically destroyed today.
yeah, Syria, yeah, you're right. Syria's in bad shape right now. The thing about this is that, my commentator said that Damascus in reality was not destroyed. It was pillaged, but not totally destroyed. And its king was executed, and it was divided into 4 provinces by the Assyrians. That's kind of like, I didn't think about that. Now we go to chapter 19. An oracle concerning Egypt. Remember, this is an oracle. This is like a request, like, what's going to happen? And why against Egypt? What was Egypt's role in all of this? This is the second episode. The Egyptians had approached Hezekiah and said, do you want to form an alliance with us against Assyria? Okay, so here's Isaiah now speaking against Egypt. Behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and comes to Egypt, and the idols of Egypt will tremble at his presence, and the heart of the Egyptians will melt within them. And I will stir up Egyptians against Egyptians, and they will fight every man against his brother, and every man against his neighbor, a city against city, a kingdom against kingdom, and the spirit of the Egyptians within them will be emptied out. And I will confound their plans, and they will consult the idols and the sorcerers and the mediums and the wizards. And I will give over the Egyptians into the land of a hard master, and a fierce king will rule over them, says the Lord of hosts. That actually did happen. The Egyptians were conquered by the Ethiopians. Okay, so he's predicting something that he probably already knew had taken place. But this is in the context of that second. This is in the context of that second episode. Okay, chapter 20. Oh yeah. In the year that the commander-in-chief, who was sent by Sargon, there he is, the king of Assyria, came to Ashdod and fought against it and took it. At the time the Lord had spoken by Isaiah the son of Amoz, saying, go and loose the sackcloth from your loins and take off your shoes from your feet. And he had done so, walking naked and barefoot. The Lord said, as my servant Isaiah has walked naked and barefoot for 3 years, as a sign, I hope he had sunscreen, as a sign and a portent against Egypt and Ethiopia, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptian captives and the Ethiopian exiles, both the young and the old, naked and barefoot, with buttocks uncovered, to the shame of Egypt. So in other words, he is quote predicting that Assyria is going to take over Egypt. And so this walking naked for 3 years is symbolic of the Assyrians taking the Egyptians into captivity. And maybe that's the way they used to do it, that you had to you walk naked into captivity. Okay, at least that's the story that you get from this particular oracle. So in other words, what is Isaiah saying to Hezekiah and the people of Judah about Egypt? Don't mess with them. Don't get into an alliance with them. Nothing but bad things will result. Make sense? Okay. Let's see. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to skip that one too. All right, I'm going to go all the way to chapter 29. Because we're running out of time.
Wouldn't it be better to take them in and add another day or another time? You know, to go ahead.
Oh, I'm almost done.
Well, I feel like you're skipping so much. I want not worth it.
The things that I'm skipping are, they were things that I thought, if something has to go, this can go.
Okay.
It's stuff that just reinforces things that I've already said.
Okay.
It's not really new material, but
Okay.
yeah. If it were, I would not skip it.
fact that we went over this is amazing.
Yeah. It is. Okay, so, Ariel. Ariel, the city where David encamped. And Ariel is Jerusalem. You need a scorecard. Okay? Ephraim is Israel. Aram is Syria. Ariel is Jerusalem, the city where David encamped. Add year to year, let the feasts run their round. Yet I will distress Ariel, and there shall be moaning and lamentation. And she shall be to me like an Ariel, and I will encamp against you round about, and will besiege you with towers, and I will raise siege works against you. And that's exactly what the Assyrians did. Okay? This is an announcement of the siege of Jerusalem by Sennacherib. But then, as so often happens in Isaiah, is it not yet a very little while until Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, and the fruitful field shall be regarded as a forest. In that day the deaf shall hear the words of a book, and out of their gloom and darkness the eyes of the blind shall see. The meek shall obtain fresh joy in the Lord, and the poor among men shall exalt in the Holy One of Israel. Hey, this is good. For the ruthless shall come to naught, and the scoffer cease, and all who watch to do evil shall be cut off. Who by a word make a man out to be an offender, and lay a snare for him who reproves in the gate. With an empty plea turn aside him who is in the right. So this is again this theme of hope. And now chapter 30. Here comes another woe. Woe to the rebellious children, says the Lord, who carry out a plan, but not mine, and who make a league, who enter into an alliance, right? Who make a league, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin. Who set out to go down to Egypt without asking for my counsel, to take refuge in the protection of Pharaoh, and to seek shelter in the shadow of Egypt. Therefore shall the protection of Pharaoh turn to your shame, and the shelter in the shadow of Egypt to your humiliation. For though his officials are at Zoan and his envoys reach Hanes, everyone comes to shame through a people that cannot profit them. That brings neither help nor profit, but shame and disgrace. I'll jump down to verse 7. For Egypt's help is worthless and empty. Therefore I have called her Rahab, who sits still. Who's Rahab? Rahab is the sea monster that represents, one of the sea monsters that represents chaos. So if Rahab is still, then Rahab is not a threat. Okay, so what is Isaiah saying here? Forget about Egypt. Egypt will not help you. Okay? Egypt will not do you any good. Okay, and we're gonna make it.
I have confidence.
Let me do this. Yeah. Now, if we go down to chapter 36, the rest of this is like woes and predictions of stuff that we've already looked at. So if you look at chapter 36. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. And the king of Assyria sent the Rabshakeh. I had to look up who the Rabshakeh is. The Rabshakeh is a military rank. He is the chief cupbearer of the Assyrian monarch. Okay, the Rabshakeh. The name literally means chief of the princes. So what we're seeing here is
An envoy.
Yeah, it's a representative who's come, and these verses are actually a repeat of the second book of Kings, chapter 18, verse 13 to chapter 19, verse 37. The only thing that is omitted in these verses that is in the second book of Kings is that Hezekiah had to pay a huge sum of money to keep Jerusalem from being taken over. It's not mentioned in these verses. Okay. Anyway, so if you look through chapter 36, you will see this is Sennacherib and his attack against Judah and his attack against Jerusalem. And so the Rabshakeh say to Hezekiah, thus and there, on what do you rest this confidence of yours? Do you think that mere words are strategy? Behold, you are relying on Egypt, that broken reed of a staff. So on and on and on. He's pretty much saying, we're going to defeat you. Yeah. Beware lest Hezekiah mislead you by saying the Lord will deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who among all the gods of these countries have delivered their countries out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver? In other words, the Rabshakeh is kind of like scoffing that somehow Israel or Jerusalem is going to escape, because they got him surrounded. Okay. When King Hezekiah heard it, he rent his clothes, sign of mourning, and covered himself with sackcloth, and he sent the Laachim, etc., etc., etc. Here, let me read about it rather than reading all of it. So, when you get down here a little farther, these verses actually conflate two different versions of how Jerusalem got rescued. In verses 7 and 8, it says, Behold, I will put a spirit in him so that he shall hear a rumor and return to his own land, and I will make him fall by the sword in his own land. Then Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria fighting against Libnah, for he had heard that the king had left Lachish. So that's one of the reasons why Jerusalem was spared, because the army had to go back. They heard a rumor, they had to go back and fight somewhere else. But if you look down further, verse 36, this is the other explanation of how Jerusalem was spared. And the angel of the Lord went forth and slew 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when men arose early in the morning, behold, these were all dead bodies. So there's two different explanations of how Jerusalem got spared. 185,000. Wow! And the other one is that the Assyrians got drawn away by a different battle. Okay? So they're both there. Okay, so then in chapter 39, what you see is this visit from the Babylonians. Okay? The Babylonians want Hezekiah to enter into an alliance to defeat Assyria. You will note that later on the Babylonians would be the ones who would actually conquer Judah in the year 586. So what do you think Isaiah's response to this was? Don't hook up with the Babylonians. Okay? Do not do that. That is a bad idea. So there is our sprint through first Isaiah. But I think, there's a lot of little details here about Maher, Shalal-Hashbaz, and all of that. But what we see in Isaiah is him doing a couple of different things. First of all, telling the people of Judah that they have not lived up to the covenant. And what in particular have they not done? They have not practiced social justice. They've not taken care of the poor, the widows, and the orphans. That's number one. Number two, don't enter into military alliances with foreign nations. Don't do it. Trust in God. And third, God is going to punish you. He will punish you. That punishment is a purification, and after the punishment is over, you will be restored. Through all of that, I guess we could have done this in 10 minutes this morning, but through all of that, that's really the message of 1st Isaiah. And we'll see next week in 2nd Isaiah that his message is quite different because the context of his preaching is quite different. Any last thoughts? Anybody think of anything after all of that?
You know what, all this going on, okay, can you imagine why the Jewish people didn't know whether they were up, down, or in between? I mean, they were captured, and they were destroyed, and they came back, and they went back again.
That's right.
They came back again, then they were destroyed again.
That's right. That's right.
You know, from what we're familiar with, when Moses shows up and does all this thing, then they're saying, oh, why are we gonna try this guy again when we've done, our ancestors have been through
Yeah.
all this other stuff?
I look at it this way, Lee. There was all kinds of things that they were going through. And they were trying to figure it out. What is actually going on here?
It's not personal.
No. Thank you for coming. Well, why don't we call it and I'll answer your question.